Welcome to day one of my fall or autumn, depending where you live, watercolor challenge. Today we're going to paint a beautiful hydrangea leaf, but first let me quickly tell you what the challenge is all about. So in this challenge, I'm going to give you 5 days of full tutorials on YouTube. We're not going to include the drawing this time. I'm a very big advocate of drawing, but I'm just going to concentrate on the watercolor painting. So we're going to do 5 autumn or fall-based challenges, and they're going to be simple, small, still life type objects, all around a beautiful autumn theme. I'll be taking you through every stage of the painting and all of the colors that I use. Now, to be clear, all of the tutorials on YouTube will be up and they will remain up forever. So if you find this in 2 years' time, you can still do this challenge. And these tutorials will be complete and completely free. However, I am making a small admin charge this time for those of you who want to get the downloadable PDFs that go alongside them, simply because it takes me many hours and weeks to put things like this together. So if you would like those, it's going to be a small $5 charge, and it's not $5 per day, it's $5 for the whole thing. And you can pop over to my course website and you can download a PDF that goes along with each day's challenge. And you will get the photograph, you'll get a black and white version of the photograph for tonal contrast. You'll also get a list of the colours that I use, all of the materials, all written out for you. You'll also get colour swaps, so you don't have to have the same colours as me. And in those PDFs, I'll give you some alternatives that you can either mix yourself or perhaps that you already have in a tube, so that you can paint along with me without buying anything extra. As I said, if you just want to watch the tutorials, they'll be here on YouTube completely free. But if you do want those additional PDFs, just click the link in the description, make a free account on my Thinkific website, and then for $5 you can download all of those PDFs. Now let's get on with today's challenge. So here's my photograph, and if you've been following the saga of my ongoing printer issues, even though I've got a brand new printer, it's still not printing quite as bright and vibrant as it is in real life, in that it's a little bit brighter and more yellow and the reds are a little bit more vibrant. So we're going to choose our colours in a minute. And these 5 tutorials, these 5 fall or autumn tutorials, do not include the drawing. I normally always include drawing, big advocate of drawing and drawing skills. But to make this accessible to beginners and to keep these videos short, we're not including the drawing. So I'm going to trace this down, and then we'll get started on the painting. One thing that we will not be using for this is masking fluid. I don't hate masking fluid. I do use masking fluid, but I've never seen anybody use it very effectively on things like leaves. So we've got some other solutions we're going to use. So as if by magic, we have our drawing. Yeah, now you'll notice that I don't draw every single little vein, because if we look at the photograph, you'll see that there are tons of tiny veins here. I said at the beginning, I don't want to use masking fluid. It never looks natural for this sort of subject. So I've got another alternative. We're going to paint these bigger veins in a moment. But first of all, I'm going to make an attempt to get some of these lighter ones. And I'm just going to draw them in by eye, because it really doesn't matter if you get them wrong. Just keep looking at your photograph. I'm going to use this. Now, this is not watercolor pencil, this is a colored pencil, and it will to some extent resist the watercolor. Now, it won't be as full on bold as something like masking fluid would be, but where it does remain on show, it will look a lot more natural. I'll show you how we're going to make it show later. You could use, a yellow for this. I've got this kind of lime green color, and I'm going to go in and just draw some of these little veins where I see them. Remember to draw them in the direction that they're growing, in other words, outwards. That way they will taper more towards the outside edge and look more natural. So here we go. Now, another thing to say at this point is don't draw your graphite pencil lines as dark as me. I have to do them this dark or they don't really show up on screen. I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. And also because I use that underneath layer as the downloadable tracing in the PDF. So what I'm going to do now is go in with some of this beautiful Daniel Smith green gold. And I'm just going to paint the stem and the larger veins on the leaf. So keeping the colour fairly light, being aware that dark colours will be around it later on, but of course making it strong enough that it still looks nice and bright. Now, if you don't have a colour like this, you can mix one, something like a phthalo blue and a sort of a warm transparent yellow, maybe an Indian yellow will give the same sort of effect, but just use the colours that you have. Now, I nearly always put a wash right over the entire leaf when I do something like this, but the problem that we've got is that red and green are opposite colours and they will dull each other down. And that's okay in places, but we do want to keep that beautiful bright red as well. So I've made the decision this time just to paint the veins here. So I'm going to carry on with the rest of that, and then I'm going to let it get completely dry before I do the next stage. At this stage, we're going to introduce some more colours. So I've squeezed out here. This is a permanent rose, but this one is one that I know to be on the warmer side. It's a very strong colour. You could also use something like an alizarin crimson, a quinacridone rose, or a pyrrole red. So you want a red that's very bright and strong, and when it's watered down becomes a pink. We're going to use some more of our Daniel Smith green gold. I'm going to introduce some of this French ultramarine. This is a deep ultramarine. You can use any ultramarine or a cobalt. You could even use a phthalo for a brighter effect. We're just going to use this in places to darken the green. This is a manufacturer's sample. That's the reason it's got a little handwritten top. I'm also going to use a dark brown watercolor pencil, which I have sharpened. Now you'll notice I marked some little holes and circles on the leaf. I'm going to add those as I go in. In other words, I'm going to paint round most of them. I think this one over here is actually just a little circle. We're going to use the watercolor pencil to help with those. What I want to do is paint in between the large veins and over the small veins. Now, because this is ordinary coloured pencil on this tiny veins here, it will resist the watercolour to some extent, but not fully. If we sweep across with a damp brush and lift some of the paint off, it'll stay on the paper, it'll sink into the paper, but some of it will remain showing. Overall, it's going to look a lot more realistic than masking fluid, and I'm just going to start painting around, adding the pink and the blue when I need it. So I'm going to start here. Now you might say to me, well, I can't paint round things very neatly and that's why I use masking fluid. But honestly, even if you end up covering up 50% of these lines, it's still going to look more natural than using masking fluid. I'm adding a little pink in here. Remember to clean your brush at intervals. I've actually got 2 water jars. Keep my water nice and clean. And anywhere that's got any darkness to it, we're going to go straight in with a little blue. And I particularly want to go dark next to those light yellow areas because that will help the veins to stand out. I'm going to continue painting round and I'll bring you in again as I go onto these redder areas up the top. So just before we go on to the next stage of our painting, can I please ask you if you wouldn't mind just liking this video? Leave me a comment and let me know if you're going to take part in this challenge. And once all the videos are up, I'll link all 5 of them, so they'll all be linked within the description of each video so that you can find the other ones in the series. Now let's get back to our painting. So we're working our way up the top here. It's so important that you keep cleaning your brush because we want to make sure these colours stay, although they blend together, they also stay separate and clean. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with everything looking kind of orangey brown. So I'm coming in like this. The other thing you want to make sure is that you're not putting too much water on the paper, which can have the same effect. Now you may feel that some of those little veins we drew are completely disappearing, but you can actually, another method of making them appear, so you can try sweeping out, which will have some effect, but less so when they are a similar colour to the one we've put on top. You can also take an eraser over the top when it's dry, and that will also remove some of the paint that's sitting on top there. Now, as I come around the edges here, I'm going to use my watercolor pencil, so I've got that little circle there. I can also, in places, just use it to get some of those little burn marks that we get. Whenever you go back into paint that's damp, you may get some bleeding happening with the new bits that you're putting on. It's not a disaster with autumn leaves. You see the colour we got here when I dropped the ultramarine in, almost a sort of a brownish purple. That's quite nice, but again, you don't want too much of that. It's important to keep these colours fresh and clean. which is why I've got 2 water jars, and I'm trying to maintain some clarity, some brightness of colour. So putting those pure colours on. As I come to these little holes that we've got in the leaf, I'm going to paint around them and leave them for white paper. You want to try and make sure that no areas are completely drying, so I'll come back up here and just keep that wet paint coming round, and then where I want to, I can use this brown with the sharp point just to get any little marks, holes or burnt edges on the leaf. As I work methodically around the picture, anywhere that the green and the red are joining will become a sort of a brownish colour. These are colours that do exist in the leaf, but again, be careful not to overblend so that you end up, I'm just sweeping up with a damp brush here. So you don't want to end up with everything being the same colour. I'm going to continue working around my leaf with this layer of paint. So I want you to notice how much lighter and brighter I went up the top there, because this leaf is darker as we come lower down. We want to get that real feeling of brightness to it. It can be easy to go far too dark with all of the colour. I've also made sure to keep some nice bright areas of red. You don't need to pre-mix a dark green. You're just going to go straight in with your blue, and it's going to darken that bright green. Dark areas recede, so it's also going to give an idea of the three-dimensional effect around the stem. So of course this is still drying, but those very tiny veins, they are actually showing up. I'll try and zoom in so that you can see. What I want to do now is get just a little bit of three-dimensional effect on this lower part of the stem here. I'll move it up so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to take a little of this ultramarine blue and mix it in with some red. I'm getting a fairly dullish purple shade. I'm now going to put some clean water on this stem. So when you're wetting an area like this, you want it saturated but not with puddles, because we want to control the paint that's going on. Now I'm going to pick up with a fairly dry brush just a touch of this colour, and I'm going to run it along the side. So stems that curve usually have some colour either down both sides, or shadow I should say, or down one side. You can add a little more red if you want to. Whenever you have a leaf or a plant like a rose that has some pink or some red in, you never need to find a different colour. You can just use that same colour from your palette to naturally add a little interest and shadow. I'm just going to take this up the centre just a tiny bit, just so it's not too flat. I'm also going to use my watercolour pencil just to get a little bit of detail. Don't overdo this because you don't want it to look like it's been outlined. That's my leaf finished. However, it's not dry, so when it is dry, I'll carefully take an eraser over some of these areas. That will lift out at least some of the graphite pencil, and it may reveal a little more of those leaf veins. But you want to be careful doing that even when your work is dry, because an eraser can still smudge pigment across. So erase in small areas. Don't drag the red area across into the green. I'll put a picture up now so you can see how it looks. So do let me know in the comments if you're going to have a go at this painting. Perhaps you already grabbed your stuff and painted along with me. If you'd like to show me your results, do pop over to my Facebook group. It's completely free to join. I've also got a separate students group. You'll find that in the downloadable PDFs. Don't forget to pop into the video description if you'd like to grab those PDFs. I've also made a hashtag that I'll put on screen now if you'd like to share your work on places like Instagram. I put a lot of effort into making these challenges for you, so I'd like as many people to enjoy them as possible. I want to get the whole world watercolour painting and drawing. I'll see you again in the next video. Meantime, I think you'll find this next video very interesting indeed.